welcome back to another episode of the Oner podcast, the podcast where we break down and give our critiques on movies all in one take. I'm Austin Archer, and with me, as always, is my childhood next-door neighbor and lifelong best friend,
Cramer, England.
All right, we're here.
We are here.
We are here.
In this room. Here. 10 million years ago, and...
Yep.
You know, I'm going to say this right away. Why didn't they do a future scene?
Hey,
why didn't they do like 10,000 years in the future?
Yeah, what are we doing? Come on, give me
something where like George Jetson's flying around or something.
Yeah, nice. If we're going to do dinosaurs,
yeah,
we can't go,
why not?
We can't go past 2024 in here.
Exactly.
What about the people who are watching this movie in 2050? They need to see them. Yeah.
They need to come up with some sort of aliens that are living, or, you know, who knows? Do something crazy.
Yeah, everybody is living in the metaverse, and everybody's wearing MetaQuest headsets, and they just sort of just sit on the couch.
Yeah, they're like really big. And, yeah.
And they don't say anything. They're just like,
they got food all over their chest because they're just laying down. Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think it's really good, actually, that we decided to do Forrest Gump right before doing this movie, because it really, I mean, obviously the marketing gimmick was like, it's Hanks and Robin Wright and Eric Roth and Robert Zemeckis. The same people, like the same writing team, the same acting team, but also it just feels like, especially from Zemeckis and Roth, like they were like, hey, can we just do that again? You know how we wrote a screenplay that had a lot of like significant events happening to our main characters, whereas, and it's sort of inverting it, right? Because Forrest Gump is like, our protagonist sort of blows around like a leaf on the wind through all of these major world events. And in this place, it's like the camera is stationary and all of these major world events sort of happen, come to this place, whether it's by hearing it, watching the Beatles on TV, or for some reason the guy who invents the Lazy Boy does it in that living room, or Benjamin Franklin, his son lived across the street, so Benjamin Franklin's coming through, and he very
strange.
And it's sort of the same idea where they were trying to do that kind of tongue-in-cheek thing that Forrest Gump does, where it's like, and it just sort of happens to be that Elvis is staying in the room, or it just happens to be that I'm on a talk show and John Lennon's there, or it just, and that kind of charm. And they tried to do that with this screenplay, and it doesn't succeed anywhere near as well.
And you know, the funny thing is, so this, I thought that exact same thing. I was like, well, this is just kind of like Forrest Gump in one spot. Like, the structure of, kind of like the idea of it. But then, you know, I had heard this a while ago as well. So Eric Roth wrote Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And I never realized this until I heard it on a podcast, but they're like, that's basically Forrest Gump set in a different time period. Because he goes through all these events, World War I, and he has interaction with all of these people. And so it's the same movie. So to me, I was like, okay, so there's Forrest Gump, and then there's Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and now this seems to complete the trilogy. Here seems to complete the trilogy of weird Eric Roth moving through time movies. So it was weird. I don't know.
Yeah, and of those three, this is the weirdest.
Well, and Forrest. Forrest Gump and Benjamin Button. I love both of those movies. This one,
fantastic movies.
It was very weird.
Yeah. This movie is. I was sitting there thinking in the theater, this is one of the strangest movies I've ever seen structurally. Like, and obviously, the elephant in the literal room where the camera is on a tripod. The elephant in the room is that if you don't know, if you have not seen the movie, if you haven't seen the trailer for this movie, the gimmick of the film is, and we are the Oner podcast, you know, there have been movies made like 1917 or Birdman or, Irreversible by Gaspar Noé. the gimmick of this film is the camera never moves and it never technically cuts either. It sort of just transitions seamlessly between time periods, and with digital effects. But the camera is stationary, and it is stationary, and time is moving by in front of this camera. And so I'm not against this. I'm not against this concept. From a technical filmmaking standpoint, I'm interested in it. I think that it's just that the way, to me, it's the structure of the screenplay that makes it feel so bizarre. Because, and you said this on our last episode, you said something about, I wish filmmakers would take more license when adapting something. So this is adapted from a graphic novel, and it feels like Robert Zemeckis was trying to, like, I've even heard him talk about this in interviews. He was like, how do you make a graphic novel into a movie? So then they do this editing style that makes it look like a comic book or a graphic novel. And it seems like they were just trying to do the things that were in the novel. And I was like, yeah, big mistake there, guys, because this is the movie now. So you need to make this the movie version. And I think that where the screenplay for this movie really fails, and what really doesn't work out, is that, like, it seems like the graphic novel was a collection of short stories about different time periods. I haven't read it. I'd have to look at it. Different time periods that existed in this same place. But a movie needs a central story. We need a main storyline and obviously this movie does have a main storyline, but we don't get to sit with it long enough ever to actually latch in.
No, and I really like. I have not read the graphic novel either. I looked it up and kind of read about it. It's just exactly what you said. Kind of one spot and people moving throughout time, huge spans of time, like hundreds of millions of years or whatever it is. But I like the concept of this movie in the fact that, like, you're in a house and it's amazing to see the stories that happened in this spot, not necessarily from one camera angle, but from this house, like, and all the stories, all the people who have lived here, all the events that have happened in this general area. I really like that concept. Like, oh yeah, who lived in this house before us? Like, what was it? What did they do? What type of people were they? I do like the fact in this movie that they kind of show similar threads through certain things. They didn't do it as much as I thought they would, but the biggest problem that I have is that the best thing about movies is that you can cut, and you can, or sometimes you don't need to cut, but you can get close-ups. You can edit the world so that it comes out how you want. And the thing about close-ups that really help a movie is that you start to engage with the character, whoever is in a close-up, right? Like you can gain empathy with them, or you can lose empathy. Like, there's a lot of emotion that goes into framing in a film, and this didn't have that. Like, it felt so much like a play. And plays are great. I love plays. Like, there's nothing wrong with plays, but when a movie is trying to be like a play, like, that you're losing such a core value of your medium. Like, show me their faces, show me up close, cut, and, like, show me around, like, move the camera if you need to, because then I engage more. On this, this was not a horrible movie, but I was so disengaged with it the whole time, and it felt like a play in the worst way, unfortunately.
That's such a good point. I hadn't actually considered that, like, the actual distance that you have from the characters by always being in a master, that you never actually get up there and actually see the details of what's going on in their performance, like you would even in a movie that's all done in one shot. There, 1917, there are lots of moments where the camera gets to get right up into the character's face, where it pulls out. I didn't mention this at the top of the show, but if anyone notices that my typical smiley face is a, how do I point? I'm backwards. It's a frowny face today. That's my one political message that I'll make on our very non-political movie podcast. That's my political message, is frowny face. But you're absolutely right that it did feel like a play. Yeah. I don't think that So the big question that I was going to have coming into this conversation with you is, do you think that anyone will try this again? I know that the idea of the impetus for this movie comes from a graphic novel that is all from this one vantage point. And maybe that's just the right medium for this kind of idea, because I agree with you. Yeah. Great concept, really intriguing concept. It's all this one perspective. It's life from this one fixed perspective. Really cool concept. Can it work as a movie? And maybe one of the things that makes the answer no, it can't work as a movie is the inability to get close-ups. Now, Zemeckis does everything he can to try to bring characters into a close perspective at times. Oftentimes that feels kind of awkward. It feels unnatural. Like it feels unnatural. It feels like they're standing in an area in the room that would be weird for them to stand in. It's like, I'm not sure that's where you would stand to have that moment. And also in this idea of it feeling like a play, because it does feel like a play and it's performed like a play. A lot of this I go to Zemeckis because, as we talked about last week, he's a guy that's always been fascinated in film technology. Yeah. And he talked about the different things that they had to do to make this movie, that they had to make like custom tracks and things that people walked on that were green screen to make, because close-ups. If people are standing at the camera and they're different heights and there's such different heights that you can't get them in the frame, you're going to have like some kind of apple box for, say, Robin Wright to stand on when she's standing next to Tom Hanks, if their heights aren't working out for them to be in that close-up shot together. So how do you hide the apple box? And they would have these like blue screened kind of like different tracks that people would walk on that would make it so that when they walk into their close-up, they're at the same height. And that's sort of his MO as a director, is the how of it, the technical aspect of it. But I found this very revealing. He just was on Mark Maron's podcast, and Maron was asking him, because Maron's always interested in like actors, because Maron's an actor too. And he's always interested when he talks to his directors, like, what's this guy like? And what, and he goes like, what's Hanks like? What's his process like? And Robert Zemeckis just goes, oh, I don't know. I never talk to actors about their process. I don't really, because I just kind of hire good actors and I just let them do their thing. He told this anecdote about Denzel Washington when they were making Flight. And, Maron's like, man, is Denzel a pretty intense guy? And he goes, well, we never really had a call time for Denzel. We would just sort of stage the scene and do everything we needed to do. And then when we were about ready to go, I would just sort of turn around and he would just be there. And he goes, he would just all of a sudden he'd be there, and he goes, he'd have headphones in and he would like sit down in his chair and he would take his headphones out and we would get everything set and he would just go and he'd be brilliant. And he would be, best performance you've ever seen, because it's Denzel Washington. And he goes, one day I asked him like, hey, what are you listening to? And do you mind if I get the playlist that you're listening to? And Denzel just told him, no, I don't give it to anybody. And he just goes, oh, no. And that was it. Like, and so my point being, I think in Zemeckis' career, he's done a good job of just casting good actors and letting them do their thing. The problem is, in theater, and I can say this as a theater actor, so film is much more of a director's medium than theater is, meaning that a director can shape a performance through editing, as you were saying. If a performance isn't really working, you can cut around things to make, the director and the editor can work together, and the cinematographer can work together to shape a performance. Stage is the actor's medium. Stage is like, the director definitely is there to give you your blocking and to help you with motivation and stuff, but the director really needs to be an actor forward director in a stage production, because it's just going to be the actors up there. And so it's like, if we can't communicate what we need to communicate with these performances without any editing tricks or anything like that, then it's going to be kind of a crappy play. And that's the thing, is it's not just that here feels like a play, it feels like kind of a bad play. It does. These are world-class actors who feel like they don't know what to do with, Paul Bettany, I thought was kind of bad in this movie.
He was the worst, unfortunately. I love him. But he was the worst. Bettany,
but it's like, he's not really, if he's working with a director like Zemeckis, who is used to just sort of letting good actors do what they do and then cutting it together in the edit, but it's theater, these actors are just up there doing a scene that is all in one take, where their whole body is visible. They need a director who can get in there and work with them on that scene and can help them. But
yeah, and I think I totally agree. Paul Bettany was the worst in this movie. Maybe not the worst, but of the main cast, he was the worst. But it was he was performing as if he was in a play. And I mean, this is very oversimplified, but acting for movie, and I'm not experienced with this, so you could probably speak to this more, but acting in a movie and acting in a play is very different, because when you're in a play, you have to emote a little bit more. You have to kind of let people know, what you're feeling, or it's just a little bit different. It's a little bit bigger. Movie acting, film acting is a little bit more subtle, right? Like the camera can get in, so your body language can speak for you more, your facial expression can speak for you more. If I'm on the back row in a play, I can't really see your facial expression, so they kind of need to be bigger for a play, right? Would you say that that's pretty accurate?
Absolutely, yeah. It's acting on stage, it's a full body expression.
Yes.
And
yeah, and it works great. Like, if you're a good theater actor, you can do amazing things. This Paul Bettany seemed like he was doing, acting for a theater, and I'm like, why are you so, like, you are over the top, man? Like, this is just kind of ridiculous. And I feel bad because I love him in almost every other movie that I've seen him in, but this one I was like, I just can't take you seriously.
And we're picking on him, but everybody is having this problem.
Yeah,
everybody.
Even Tom Hanks was Robin Wright was like the best one.
Yeah,
but Tom Hanks wasn't that great. Like I was surprised.
No, weird. I would say Robin Wright probably gives the most grounded performance.
Yeah.
But everyone is struggling with the form, and it doesn't feel like they're getting a lot of help from their director, because the director has admitted he doesn't do that. He doesn't get into scene work with the actors. He hires good actors and just trusts that they know what they're doing. Unfortunately, this thing that they're working on is kind of unprecedented. Like, they're doing a movie, and that's the thing, is like, when we kind of did this maybe backwards, but I wanted to say at least like and I guess we did talk about this, but what interests me and fascinates me and what works for me about here is the concept. And I'm always excited to watch something that is unlike anything I've ever seen before. That's always exciting. It's exciting to sit in the theater and go, I've never seen a movie quite like this before. And I can as Zemeckis being a guy who's always trying to push the form into new spaces technologically and try new things, I definitely sat there and was like, yeah, this movie's weird as hell. And it's also, I've never seen anything like it. And that's
in a bad way.
But not even necessarily in a bad way. Like the fact that it feels like a play that's being filmed and that's sort of like moving through time with these interesting transitions. But yeah, the actors needed more help from the director. The script needed more work. So Eric Roth and the Forrest Gump script sort of has this this charm to it, where things like Forrest washing his face off with the yellow shirt and the smiley face being underneath. There's sort of this like sense of humor, this charm about like these historical events coming to pass. This movie had some of the most heavy-handed ways, or like, the way that Jenny just says, hey, I'm sick with a virus, and they don't know what it is. And that's these subtle, we talked about this so much as when we were kids, you have to piece together the puzzle of what's being talked about in Forrest Gump. They try to do that in here, but it was so overwhelmingly heavy-handed. Like, again, to our audience, we didn't issue this, but this is spoiler warning. We are going to talk about plot details of this movie. In this movie, Robin Wright's character starts to suffer cognitive decline at some point in the early 2000s. And it's like a 20-year process of her like slowly losing her memory. Yeah. And it starts with scenes where she'll come home and say, oh, it's the damnedest thing. I just was driving home and I forgot where our house was. But then there'll just be like a really heavy-handed line where Tom Hanks will be talking to his dad and he'll be like, man, she sure is forgetting a lot of things lately. And it feels like, movie, I can see what's happening. Like, my goodness.
It's just so weird. It felt so strange. Like, well, you're going through a lot. And I was like, no, it's Alzheimer's. Anyone could see that. Like, why would you just say that? Yeah.
And he sort of does it like this G. Willikers thing. Like, boy, she's sure been forgetting a lot. And I'm like, the whole audience, like, no one in the it's not. I loved when the maid too, the maid for the family in the future. Well, I guess we're in the present, is walking around the house and she's spraying things and sniffing, and then she goes, I can't smell anything. And she says it out loud. And it's this way of talking about COVID. And I was like, is that how that moment goes? Is the person goes, I can't smell it. It's just so like on the nose, like the way that they deliver information. The part of the movie where I was like, okay, Eric Roth and Bob Zemeckis, come on, is Tom Hanks walks in at one point with a pristine McDonald's bag that is facing out to the audience, and he walks in holding it, presenting it to camera, and he goes, I bought us our favorite breakfast. I thought we could talk. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me, movie.
That was the weirdest scene, because then she's like, I want a divorce, and I was like, what? What is this? Like, what?
It was the egg McMuffins.
McDonald's. Is McDonald's okay with this? Are you okay? Like, I'm associating divorce with McDonald's now. No, it was so weird.
The fact that he comes in and goes, I bought our favorite breakfast. I thought we could have a talk. I was like, what?
I thought I was in the Truman Show. I was like, are you guys like really doing product placement right now? Like, what? Because you can't move. You can't move the camera, so I got to bring it in. I got our favorite breakfast. Yeah, that was so weird.
It was Laura Linney on the Truman Show. It was totally. That's exactly what it was. It was so. It took me out of the movie so much because I was like, hey, I know that movies do this. Forrest Gump drinks 15 Dr. Peppers at the White House. I know. I get it.
Yeah,
I get that we're dropping in name brands here. I get it. But like, holy smokes, dude! Like, you couldn't have just like had the family just eating McDonald's and not saying, "Look what I got! It's our favorite." Like, I just was like, "Whoa!"
There's the problem with being so heavy-handed is because they can't move the camera. What you could do is you could show Robin Wright in her car and being confused and trying to find her house, and like, and you can show that, and then you don't have to say, it was the darndest thing. I forgot where I lived for a moment, Oh yeah, well, you're going through a lot of stress, so let's just move on with the conversation. Like, what? Like, because you're sitting in one spot, you can't do that.
Yeah, and then a scene later talking to his dad and going, she sure has been forgetting a lot of things lately. And and again, this is why I say, yes, it reminds me of a play, but a poorly written play. Because if I saw a play and they said that, I'd go, oh, come on. I'd go, there's got to be a smarter way to write this in. There's got to be a better way. And okay, so here is another. I see this as we're talking about little things that they could have helped these actors more, helped this concept more. I want to talk about one of the biggest failings of the story of here is we are following 5 different. There's the guy with the airplane.
Yeah, the guy with the airplane, the Native American story.
And
the Robin
Lazy
Wright,
Boy
Tom
Inventor.
Hanks, Lazy Boy Inventor.
Tom Hanks, and the family that their maid gets COVID.
Yes, 5 stories.
And Benjamin Franklin's family, 6.
Yeah.
And because we do see them more than once.
We do.
So
there's a couple times.
Yeah, 6 different.
You ruffians. Whatever.
Yeah. And boy, that was so over the top too.
So bad.
And like the heavy-handedness of being like, no one shall remember the name Benjamin Franklin, and then like them at Halloween being like, I'm dressed up like Benjamin Franklin. I just was like, oh my goodness. But we're following these 5 storylines, and if the movie 6 storylines, and if the movie could just be honest, and it seems to know this from the marketing, and it seems to know this from the posters and everything. The main storyline is Tom Hanks and Robin Wright and their family and Paul Bettany. That is our anchor storyline. The problem this screenplay has, and I imagine that this is how the graphic novel goes, and it's not how the movie should go. The problem this movie has is we are constantly leaving our anchor storyline to check in on these other 5 storylines, and none of them have anywhere near the emotional viability or and they're all very simple. Like in one storyline, there's just a man who owns an airplane, and he's determined to convince his wife that aviation is the future and that she needs to get on board with him owning an airplane. And she doesn't like the fact that he owns an airplane because she thinks it's dangerous. That's the whole storyline. In another storyline, there's a guy who's inventing the lazy boy. He's an inventor, and him and his wife are like kind of like a funny couple who live in, kind of the end of like the roaring 20s, and they're inventing these, they're trying to sell inventions. That's the whole storyline. This other storyline in the future is like, it's this family that moved in, and we know nothing about them. They're just like black, and they educate their son about dealing with the police at one point, but we know nothing. We have no idea what's going on with them. And then one of the people is Benjamin Franklin's son, who doesn't like his dad. And that's it. It's just how it, and then there's this Native American, indigenous couple who are just in love, and we learn no details about them other than that they love each other.
And they conceived a child on the rock that used to be there.
And all of these other storylines we could get in an opening montage. We could do a 10 to 15 minute long montage showing all of the different people who lived in this spot, and then land on our anchor storyline and then stay there. Because the problem with this movie is it keeps checking back in with the guy who's inventing the lazy boy or the guy who owns the airplane. And every time we check back in with them, nothing new is happening or interesting in their lives. And we're just like taking a break from the main storyline, and we go back to these people, and it's like they show us like a little 30-second clip of the guy arguing with his wife about airplanes, and it's like, yeah, I know, she doesn't like the planes. That's what happened last time you showed us them. And then they go back to Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, and it's like, yeah, this is the movie. Why do you keep like taking breaks to
the thing that they did this a couple times, but I was hoping that this would have been more present, or at least better handled. Like when, and I can't even think of an instance, but when they would go back in time, like they'd have one storyline, with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, and then they'd flash to another storyline that is similar, right? Like a similar thing happened to this couple, and maybe it turned out differently. And that happened, I want to say, only like a few times. Like it would happen, there would be similar things, but they'd be in different parts of the movie that I'd be like, why didn't you put those together? Like, why aren't those two scenes together so that I can make that connection? And like, so why didn't they do that more? Like, why didn't they show that? Like, if you really didn't want to be linear, like make the B stories connect to the A story.
I thought the exact same thing. I thought if this is the concept, if this is the conceit that we're sort of shifting between all of these different things that have happened in this one place, and we need all of the other things to support and enrich what's happening in our main storyline. And you're right. There were a couple moments where it seemed like what was happening in these smaller, less important B storylines supported the emotional arc of what was happening in our main storyline. But those moments were like few and far between. Yeah. And you kind of had to like reach whereas they should have always been something like, and there were even some inventing. I didn't particularly care for the device of the transition being that like a new, so that the transitional, the technological editing device to move between the different timelines is there will be like a panel that shows up at somewhere in the frame, like a comic book panel, and it'll be something from one of the other timelines, and then slowly the main frame will mesh into that panel, and that's how we transition, and that's how the movie lets us know we're about to switch places. But there were like 2 times where that transition was like quite clever, where it cleverly, like, they'd be talking about the moon, and the moon would show up, and then we would go to a place where someone else was looking at the moon, and they would blend those into each other. And my favorite one in the entire movie is when the new family in the 21st century is moving in, and they're moving a mirror. They're like pushing a like a dresser that has a mirror on it. And in the mirror that they're pushing, we see Tom Hanks and Robin Wright having a fight at their dining room table, which is a room we've never seen before because it's behind where the camera is. And they're in the mirror that's being pushed. And then we transition to them. They get up and walk toward the mirror, and then we transition into their timeline. And I was like, I like that. That's kind of a cool, clever thing.
I like it, but it was also like you just created a scene in order for us to see another scene.
Right.
Like they're moving the mirror like, oh, okay. Like, so we can see behind the camera. Why don't you just turn the camera around? But it was clever, but it's.
Absolutely. You're right. Because the other scene that we're seeing was nothing. It was literally just these people pushing a mirror so that we could have that transition. And that's the problem, is just like the B storylines are nothing. They're nothing. So in this Forrest Gump, Benjamin Button way, it's like, yes, there's these world events happening, like the birth of aviation and the popularity of aviation. In Forrest Gump, we see these things and the movie moves on. And we continue moving on with our anchor storyline, which is Forrest and Jenny and his friends. But like these kind of like world events are pit stops of like, oh, look at that happened, move on. But this movie keeps revisiting them. Like this couple, this guy that invents the lazy boy, there is nothing that happens in this storyline besides the fact that he invents the lazy boy and him and his wife are horny, and that's it.
Yes, that's accurate.
Like, and that's it. And like we keep going back to it, and they're like, "I'm still making the lazy," but they call it the relaxy boy at first.
Relaxy
boy. Oh boy, this relaxy boy sure is gonna make us a lot of money. Then they go back to Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. They go to the indigenous people. They go back to them. Oh man, look at this relaxy boy chair that I made. Let's have sex because we're a horny couple. It was like nothing. You know what I mean? Like I just was like,
no, it really.
Why do we keep going back to them?
I know, and I was wondering that too. Like, so I just read a comment. Someone was saying that, like, a lot of it is about dreams, whether you give up on your dreams or not. Which I can see that. The pilot, he's always looking to the future. He kind of goes after his dreams. The relaxy boy couple, the lazy boy couple, they get what they want and they get their dreams. Tom Hanks didn't, follow up on his dreams, and it ultimately ended up worse. But the connective tissue between all of those is so thin, and it was really hard to make that connection. Like when I see that, I'm like, yeah, okay, I get that, but what? Like it could have, all these things could have been stronger. Like it just was not apparent.
I think you've got two options. You need to make those other storylines stronger. You need to make those you need to give us a way to invest in those characters more, because they were just cartoonish. Again, the whole play thing. The people in those storylines are not acting like real people. Like they act like caricatures, in a cartoon. And so you either need to help us invest in the emotional reality of those B storylines, so that we can see how all of these storylines are coming together to serve the theme of are you following your dreams or not, or you just needed to make them all significantly smaller so we could spend more time with our anchor storyline. And personally, I think I prefer that second one.
I agree. I do too.
That's another thing about this movie, is because we're going between all of these 6 different storylines. And again, if the whole, also, I'm not sure if I buy this whole theme of like dreams and not, because where is that in the Native American storyline? I don't like that's just like a guy and the girl that he was in love with, and they bury her, and then her necklace is found in the backyard. But there's maybe there's some sort of symbolism that's but I just was like, we revisit that storyline a lot, and it's not doing anything. Or the Benjamin Franklin thing. It's like, interesting piece of trivia. Benjamin Franklin's son lived across the street, and he and his son didn't get along. We can get that done in one scene. And we keep coming back to it. We show like 3 times his son just like walking and being like, my father, Benjamin Franklin, is a fool. And then Benjamin Franklin like going to see his son and being like, my son doesn't know anything. I'm Benjamin Franklin. And it's just like, it's like,
unfortunately, that's a completely accurate portrayal of those scenes.
And it's literally like, cool. Okay. Cool little bit of trivia. It's like if Forrest Gump just like kept intermittently just showing us what was going on in Elvis's life every once in a while, just being like, hey, just checking in on Elvis. He's still doing Elvis stuff. And it's like, yeah, isn't this movie about Forrest Gump? Like, like,
like, okay. Yeah.
Like,
and it,
cool.
Yeah, it really, it didn't, the stories, they were not significant. And then the other problem with reading about it more is that like, so it's I guess it's Benjamin Franklin's illegitimate son, but it's still his son. And then also like I don't even know where this movie is set. I thought it was Pennsylvania, but then I guess, I mean, it's not historically accurate, I guess, which is pretty easy because like Benjamin Franklin's son didn't live in Pennsylvania. They lived in New Jersey, I guess. So it's like, it's such a weird way to portray history too. Cause I mean, I don't really care that it's not accurate, but it's just weird. Like all these other movies that you did are pretty accurate. You know, he went to Vietnam and he was in Vietnam for the war. This, I don't know. It's really weird. Very, very, very strange, as we have said. And you know, the main, so the movie, when the movie starts, you know, I mean, it starts with the dinosaurs all getting killed off, you know, and then you go through the ice age or whatever.
Which also, like, apparently we are in the location where the asteroid hit. Like, you can like see the asteroid make contact from the vantage point of our camera, which means like we're in like one of the most significant locations in, you know, archaeologically in the world,
in history. Which I mean, I don't think it was in Pennsylvania, but I could be wrong. But anyway, you start there and they show like all the CGI animals. Those were horrible. Actually, you know what? Maybe I'm going to shift gears. Let's talk about the visual effects in this movie. How did you feel about them?
Bad. So we just talked about Forrest Gump. This is a 30-year-old movie that has so many effect shots. There are so many effect shots at Forrest Gump, and they primarily hold up quite well. This movie Zemeckis was so excited about the technology that he was using in this movie. He kind of controversially used a lot of AI to do de-aging and stuff like that as a primary tool, with assistance from animators to sort of smooth things over, to move characters through different ages. You know, very similarly to Forrest Gump, early on in this sort of time lapse, you know, the comet hits. We go through the ice age, and then we sort of move through vegetation overgrowing, and there's a hummingbird that comes by, and there's this sort of theme of this hummingbird that keeps reappearing, and the hummingbird is sort of doing this 3D effect where it's like coming up close to the camera, then going back, and at the end of the movie, we end with the hummingbird too, and the hummingbird is sort of to hear what the feather is to Forrest Gump, and the hummingbird looks bad.
It does. It looks horrible.
It looks bad.
It doesn't look like a real hummingbird. It looks, and they show a deer at one point. I'm like, this deer looks horrible. Like all the dinosaurs look bad. They all look bad. Like, and even like with the indigenous people, when they die, like they put old makeup on them, and the makeup looked horrible. Like even your practical effects looked, if they were practical, they looked horrible. And you know, I will say the de-aging on Tom Hanks looked really, really good look-wise.
Except for
his voice.
Well, the voice, but also, did you notice in the close-ups, the mouth? We always talk about the mouth.
No, I didn't. I wasn't paying attention to the mouth.
I was looking at the mouth because that's what we talk about, is like, you know, like the mouth doesn't work in Alien Romulus. The mouths didn't work in Forrest Gump 30 years ago. And the mouths on both Robin Wright, in the first scene where he introduces Robin Wright to his dad, and there's Paul Bettany and Robin Wright and Tom Hanks are all standing quite close to the camera. The mouths are a little, it's like, oh, this is why you have to stand further back, because the mouths don't look good. It's like,
that's true. But the actual de-aging, but then the mouth doesn't look good, but his voice, he sounds like a 60-year-old man, and he's supposed to be playing a 17-year-old. Which,
yep.
I was like, I know how Tom Hanks sounds when he was younger. Like, so
and even
he doesn't sound like that.
Even them de-aging him to look younger, I was like, I'll buy you that you're 30.
Yeah.
I'm not buying that you're 18, like, or
No.
17 or 18. Like, I'm just not buying it. But whatever. The movie wants me to, it's a play. The movie wants me to suspend my disbelief that in this play, Tom Hanks is going to play everywhere from 17 to 80. And like, okay, sure. I'll go with you on that journey. And I can suspend my disbelief.
Yeah.
The visual effects in this film, which should have been, maybe one of the highlights of the film, the sort of technical aspect left a lot to be desired, to put it lightly. I do not particularly enjoy, I didn't like it when Ang Lee did it in Hulk in the 2000s. I don't particularly enjoy the concept of trying to make a movie look like a comic book, just because this was based on a graphic novel. I just am like, okay, yeah, cool. A graphic novel is a storyboard. It's it's showing, just shoot the movie. Like you don't need to be like, this is based on something that has panels. And that's how I don't think that editing concept, and that was a big part of the visual effects, right? Is the way that we're sliding between time periods. I don't think that would be necessary if this movie didn't, and this is another major problem this movie has to me, if this movie wasn't changing scenes every 30 seconds.
Yeah.
This is another thing that made the watching experience of here so weird for me and strange is, and I imagine it's like this for people when they watch a movie that is a long oneer. It's sort of like, if you're paying attention, you sit down and watch 1917 and you're not aware that the movie doesn't cut, or Birdman, and you're watching the movie, and 15 or 20 minutes into the movie, you go, I don't think the camera has cut yet. And then you start to wonder, is it going to cut? And then at a certain point, you just settle in and go, I guess not. I guess it's not going to cut. I had a similar experience watching here where, because of the way the movie starts, because, we start with the dinosaurs, asteroid, and then we just sort of do this time lapse of like the ice age, and then the ice age melts and vegetation grows over, and then people move in, indigenous people, and then colonial people move in, and they start putting buildings up, and we're doing this like very fast moving time lapse. And then we start to see like the first families that live there, and we're doing all of the, I thought, okay, at some point the movie is going to slow down and let me just be with some storyline for a while. And it just never did. The movie never just slowed down. And if any storyline really needed to just slow down and just let it happen for a while, it's our A storyline. It's our anchor storyline. And I just thought, this movie really needs to just let us be with those characters for longer than a minute at a time. And again, this is not something that's helping the actors either. The actors are showing up every day to work, and all they ever get is like a minute of a scene that's like, oh, it's 1972 now. You're this old. This has happened, and you're going to come in and do a 30-second scene about that. It's like, okay, I like, as an actor, it would be really frustrating. It'd be like, okay, I guess I'll try to figure out.
We can't, you have to get it in one take. Like, you gotta be, we can't move the camera, so just do it, and then we'll just play it out the whole time. Which there's challenges to that. It had to be frustrating in some ways for them, for sure. Yeah,
and I think what I expected when I watched the trailer for this movie is, hey, first of all, the trailer makes it look like it's just about Tom Hanks and Robin Wright and their family. Like, those are the only people that are in the trailer. None of the other 5 storylines appear in the trailer. So like,
they show up in glimpses, but barely.
Yeah. We reasonably think that that's what we're going to be following.
Yes.
But also I think that if it had just been kind of a linear, like, hey, we got to this family, this Paul Bettany and his wife move in, they start to have kids, and we just watch that story progress linearly, and you give us a good, solid 30 to 45 minutes of just watching that family. And then every once in a while, if you want, you can show us a glimpse of what was something happening in one of these other storylines that seems to line. But this movie is changing time periods and scenes like I don't know if there's a
Yeah.
scene that's longer than 2 minutes in the entire movie.
Yeah, maybe,
You know?
but then
Yeah,
the
I
other
don't
thing
know.
that I really, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything you're saying. The other problem I had is that I had to reorient myself almost every time that they changed a scene. Like, because I'm okay, what time period is this? Like, oh, it's not really telling me, and like, okay, what I don't even know what time period this is in the first place. Like, I know when Benjamin Franklin's son, like, I know about that time, but then like the pilot, what year is that? Like, so every time they would change, I mean, it would be a different family in the same location. I was like, okay, where are we? And what year
Right.
is it about? And like, oh, okay, oh, we're in this time period. Okay, so they're doing this. Like, and I know that they did that with set dressing and stuff. Like, I could tell, but even still, like within the scene, like Robin Wright and Tom Hanks, like they switch back and forth between, like different. I just didn't know what time period it was for them. So like I
I
had to keep
yeah,
reorienting myself.
I did and I'd have to watch it again to be sure. I did start to get the sense at maybe the 45-minute or hour long mark that each one of our 6 different storylines in their own, pardon me, in their own vacuum was moving linearly. That each one of
Yeah,
these,
I
like
think you're right. Yeah.
that we don't ever go back. Once we've moved on to the next event, we don't ever go back for the
Yeah.
most part.
Yeah.
There's one major thing where, like, at the very beginning of the movie, early on, Tom Hanks, as like a very old man who looks to be in his 80s,
Yeah.
walks into the house and it's empty. It looks like they're doing an open house. It looks like the house is for sale, and he
Yeah.
sets up 2 chairs. And we can all pretty much guess that we're going to come back to this later on in the film.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
other than that, each one of these storylines seems to be moving in a linear direction. Whenever we visit it, it's later than the last time that we saw it. But
Yeah.
there is nothing explicitly in the screenplay that tells us that. There are certain context clues. Sometimes the only thing we can really latch into with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright's storyline is like their kid keeps getting olher. Every time we come
Well,
back, it's like, okay, well, the kid's older, so it must be
yeah.
later,
I mean,
And
it's funny though, because it actually, now that I'm remembering it, now that you're saying this, the couch, you can tell from the couch, like they get like a sectional couch at one point, and but there is, and I'm trying to remember when this was. This is all jumbled in my mind because I don't remember. But
yeah,
like
we were
they
literally
had the
like, we can't.
sectional,
Yeah,
yeah, like they
we
had the
were just like,
sectional couch, and then at one point they went back to when Paul Bettany and his wife had their couch again, like, and they went back. So it was like, okay, for the most part, it was pretty linear, but there were definitely a few times when it went back, and like and sometimes it was a random scene that I was like, what just happened? I don't know. It was confusing.
no,
Either way, it was disorienting.
This is a different kind of normally on this show, we just go through the entire plot of a movie beat for beat, scene for scene, and both of us were like, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep the order of events in this movie straight, because it changes every couple minutes, and it's even hard to know scene to scene if we are still moving forward linearly in that continuity of that story, or if we've moved backwards. It's hard to remember, like, when do we shift to Benjamin Franklin? When do we shift to the indigenous couple? It just feels like this movie is a sort of haphazardly cut together mosaic of different ideas and different moments. And I get that that's sort of the point, right? The concept is just like all the different things that happened through time here. And I get that. And I get, that it's just this stationary perspective and life moving through this stationary perspective. But as a film, I just was like, can you lock in? Obviously, you've got a main storyline. Can you at least give me some way of just hooking in there? Because I get that the challenge of it being presented like a play is that we are going to lose the ability to edit for close-ups and stuff like that, all that stuff. But that's why you need a screenplay that helps the actors and that helps the audience, and a director that helps the actors. But it felt like the actors were I'm watching actors who are all-time greats doing like career low work doing like kind of embarrassing work, you know.
Yeah.
And but it's because the screenplay's not helping them, and the directing's not helping them, and then the edit of the film is not helping anyone, because it just, as an audience member, you're just like, I'm not sure where we are, when we are, and also these other storylines, I don't really care for any of them. And
I would really love to see Robert Zemeckis do a movie where he can't use extensive visual effects. Like go back to like, and I know that he's always been about it, which is good, and it's not that you couldn't like not use visual effects, but like quit. They seem to just be a crutch for him. Like, I'd love to see you go back to your roots and just make a movie without a lot of visual effects. Just make a movie that's good. And I could say that about a lot of directors, like, right? Like, hey, James Cameron, why don't you just make a movie that's, you know, only $30 million and see what you can do? And like, let's do that. Let's give yourself some pitfalls and problems that you have to overcome, and see how creative you can be without tons of money. And I know that Zemeckis didn't really have a ton of money for this movie, but still, like, just make a movie. Like, don't worry about it being so technologically advanced, because that comes at the detriment of the story.
Hey, use all the bells and whistles you want. Roger Rabbit's full of bells and whistles.
It's true.
Just tell me, just make a good movie. And you know, I don't know. I wonder, do you think anyone will ever attempt this again, this idea of a stationary camera, a stationary perspective?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't. I think they could, but I'm leaning towards no, because I don't know what the other justification for it would be.
I honestly have had this concept before with certain plays that I've read, where I've gone like, I would like to see this play as a movie, and I think it'd be interesting if the camera was stationary and it was performed like a film, or performed like a stage play, but it was shot like a film. Because oftentimes when you watch adaptations of plays, like, you know, Fences, for example, Denzel Washington directed Fences. And the majority of the play takes place in their backyard. And it's sort of weird to just have this whole movie that takes place in a backyard, and the camera's cutting around, like, you know, do it. And it's like, a lot of times in that movie, I just was like, I would like it if the camera was more stationary. If it was just like these actors, Viola Davis, Denzel Washington, and I can't remember who plays the son, just doing this text. And you know, kind of in a Linklater sort of way, it's like, if the camera doesn't need to cut, it doesn't need to cut. So I hope that Zemeckis hasn't killed this idea, because I am fascinated by it. I think it can work. I just think that it really requires a stronger script, and it requires stronger support for the actors. If you don't have those things, then you're not gonna have all of the other things that you usually can go to it with as a filmmaker to make up for those. You know?
I think it could work, and I think just don't do it like this. Don't do it like here, I should say.
Don't do it like here. There is another movie that is like this that I was thinking about when I left the theater, that is a lot better. And it's the same kind of idea, and it also sort of relies on a central gimmick. And I just talked about Richard Linklater, and to me it's the movie Boyhood. And it's the same kind of idea, where the general concept of the film is just like to observe life happening, to just observe how life takes place in the blink of an eye, how you know, they say it's so heavy-handed in the script for here, where they go, boy, I just blinked and all of a sudden I was 50, you know. It's so it's the screenplay is incredibly heavy-handed, but the idea, one of the main themes of the film, is just to sort of observe life the way it feels when you look back on your memories, that it just looks like your whole life just went by so quickly, and it's just sort of this sequence of moments. And the movie Boyhood is a lot like that, where it's just showing how much can happen in just a 12-year span, and how much can change. And the gimmick, the central filmmaking gimmick that Linklater used to make that movie, was he actually shot it over a 12-year span. And he just got together with the same actors every year, and he shot a little bit more and a little bit more. And we get to watch a kid go from 6 to 18, which is a monumental change. We get to watch the same actor age and change over the course of 12 years. And also Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette age and change a lot in that 12-year span. And it just kind of, the feeling at the end of that film, one of the main themes at the end of that film, Patricia Arquette has this beautiful monologue when her son is graduating high school, where she just kind of says, like, I don't know, I guess I just thought that there would be more. I just thought there would be more to my life. And I don't know, everything's just happening so fast. And it is a movie about how life just is kind of a blur, and it just moves right through you. Yeah. And I think it's far more successful because it has a stronger script. It has stronger central performances. And I think that the central gimmick that is being used is much more potent and powerful, because you're actually watching real people actually age, and it has this effect of being like, wow, it's so much more relatable. Here doesn't have characters that feel like real people. It has editing that is disorienting and haphazard. It has underbaked special effects, and it has performances that are there's not a single performance in the movie that's like, that person crushed. You're right. Robin Wright probably does the best, and even her performance is fine. Yeah. And so
it's overall disappointing. I don't know. It was not great. There's not much to this movie because I could not connect with this movie for all the reasons that we've talked about. It just there's nobody there that I could latch on. And this is their own fault. There's nobody there that I could really latch onto because we don't spend. It takes us forever to get to Tom Hanks and Robin Wright in the first place. Like it's like 20 minutes before they show up, I feel like. And then we keep cutting away from these storylines that are getting as much weight as theirs. So I'm like, okay, I can't connect with them. Like I can't do anything because Robin Wright, I connect with her story. I was connecting with her story the most because that would be horrible. It'd be horrible to spend your whole life in your in-laws' house, and then they give the house to you that you've wanted to move out for your entire life. And then you're like, well, I've got to stay there until, because it's free. Like I could relate to that, but because we moved to all these other stories, I just never stayed. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I can't really connect with you. So it was a very disappointing film.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you were saying, because of the central filmmaking gimmick, we don't have the ability to do close-ups. We don't have the ability to do a lot of visual storytelling and getting into the internal world of the character. And that's all right. If you just have to recognize that that's going to be a problem that you have making a movie this way. But that means that your script and your screenplay and also the way that you edit the movie and construct the movie, give us more time to observe these people, because you could do a scene where it's just her by herself in in that room sitting, and we could get a moment of visual storytelling where she's just, but it felt like the movie was so self-conscious about ever slowing down. It was just like, we just got to keep things moving. And I just wanted to say, some of these moments, just give us a little more time, If you want to make a moment out of Paul Bettany's character deciding that he needs to quit drinking, don't make it just this flash. Let him have that moment. Let's see it. Everything is just, if you want to make a moment out of the mother-in-law falling off a stool and having a stroke and Robin Wright finding her, everything's just blowing by at this breakneck pace, and nothing has the ability to really land. If you want to do a scene where Tom Hanks' brother announces that he's going into the military right in the middle of the Vietnam War and it causes a fight at Thanksgiving, let's have the fight. It's 3 lines. It's just 3 lines back at, and I'm like, let's actually do the fight. Let's get into it. Let's have everybody at the table,
I could not connect with that scene because it was almost like, I'm joining the war. Bye. Right. And then that was all. Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that's it. Tom Hanks, Tom Hanks is like, you better not. And he's like, I'm not going to take advice from my do nothing brother. And then he leaves and he's like, Jimmy, get back here. And he chases him out of the room, and that's it. And I'm like, no, let's have hey, if this is a play, treat it like an Arthur Miller play. This is Death of a Salesman. Let's do it. Yeah. This is the scene. Let's have the fight at Thanksgiving. Let's do it.
Yeah.
But they didn't. It just, So should we just get into our scores?
Let's do it.
Okay. If this is your first time watching our show, we give scores. We give a technical rating. Technical is for everything, on the filmmaking craft side. That's visual effects, cinematography, editing, screenwriting, acting, all of those things. We do a score for the ending. How well did they stick the ending of the film? We give a score for rewatchability. We give a score for cultural relevance and impact. And we give a score for our subjective feeling on the movie. Just how much did we like it? So Cramer, what do you think about the technical craft when it comes to here?
I didn't think it was great. Like there's a lot of, I gave it a 3. That's about it. We talked about it enough. I mean, the visual effects don't look great. The score was fine, but it felt like it was my expectations might've been a little too high for Alan Silvestri. And it was fine. Nothing bad about it, but it wasn't like it didn't stand out or move the scenes as well. It wasn't as memorable for me, but he was probably the best part of the movie. But the acting wasn't great. The directing wasn't great. Cinematography wasn't great. The lighting, it just was a lot of dull all around. So
that's very fair. And by the way, our scores are out of 10, 10 being the best score you can get. I gave this movie a 5, and here's why. I think I just wanted to commend them for attempting the challenge of something previously undone. In 2024, I got to give it up for someone who's willing, like that. That's the one thing I could say about this film is I've never quite seen anything like this. And what they're attempting here is definitely very unique from a visual standpoint, from a cinematic standpoint. It makes it almost that much more frustrating that they didn't pull it off better, that they didn't give this concept a stronger script or a better edit or support these actors more. But yeah, the acting is not great. In some instances, it's downright bad. The writing is not great, and in some instances is downright laughably bad. The editing is frenetic and self-conscious and does not serve the story and does not help the audience latch into it. The only reason I can give it a 5 is like for the attempt at doing something bold and groundbreaking. I could see that. And pulling that off from a technical standpoint reasonably well. Even Alan Silvestri's score you mentioned, and I just, it felt so much like Zemeckis and Eric Roth were trying to recreate Forrest Gump, and it felt like Silvestri was trying to recreate Forrest Gump. I was it literally sounded like from the opening notes of the score, I was like, oh, for real? He was doing like there's a little piano motif that happens in Forrest Gump, this bum 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 that opens the movie Forrest Gump. And there's something that sounds almost identical at the beginning of here. And then he has the same kind of colors that he's finding. And this is a thing that I don't know, I just was like, sometimes these older heads in the filmmaking world just haven't evolved to the point where I'm like, hey, film scores have changed, and the way that we score films is, I don't know, it just felt like an old-fashioned, worse, watered down version of the Forrest Gump score to me, and I was not. I didn't really. I wasn't particularly moved by it. What do you think of the ending of here? And this is an ending we have not discussed. But
no, the camera does move.
This is I'm going to say this.
Go ahead.
I'll say this for me. The ending is maybe the scene that got to me emotionally more than any other scene. And maybe it's just the satisfying release of the camera moving for the first time in the entire film. The camera does move, but what happens is, and it's something that I think everyone in the audience knew was going to happen because of how heavy-handed the script is. Tom Hanks brings in his estranged wife who has Alzheimer's back into their home that they raised their daughter in, and sits her down in the movie. And they recap the movie, and she sort of starts to remember their life there. And even though the entire film she had been, she had hated living there, she says, oh, I know what our lives happened here. I love it here. And for as frustrating as this film was, this got into my cynical heart a little bit.
Yeah.
This camera movement off of the wall and this, but you know, I don't know. I think stuff like that's always going to get to me. Alzheimer's patients having a moment of clarity is always going to be kind of emotional.
Yeah. I think go ahead.
Yeah. I gave it a 6 just because I think it's the thing that worked better than anything else, better than almost any other scene for me in the film.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that's high. And maybe I'm being really generous with that score, but yeah.
More generous than me. I gave it another 3. But it, you know, just because like, it was good. But then once it pulls out, like, you know, again, Robin Wright, like, oh yeah, she loved it here, you know, and even though she really didn't, but she like, you know, it pans around and then it goes back and it goes, you know, all the way to the one house that's been there the whole time. It goes up there and you see the weird hummingbird, but that felt so fake and so plastic to me that I was like totally taken out. Like, wow, that just looks horrible.
It felt like a Pixar movie.
Good. Yeah,
it felt like the end of like Toy Story or something. Like it just looked like a cartoon.
Yeah, it's like it just looks hollow. So I gave it a 3. Yeah, I didn't love it. And plus the fact that it wasn't. I mean, yeah, it's an ending, but like it didn't feel satisfying because like, what's the resolution? Like they're still divorced, and it is nice that he stays with her, but it just, and it's not that it was. It just was like, oh, okay, it just wasn't satisfying. Like, oh, okay, like you, okay, yeah.
For me, it was the emotional impact of these people. It's sort of like that scene in Stranger Than Fiction when, you know, Will Ferrell holds the manuscript of his life, and he weighs it and he decides that's good enough, you know. And there's something about that to me that will always work for me narratively. Of like, if it's a movie about life, kind of like Boyhood or anything, if it's a movie just about just the mundanities of life, when there's that scene where people just reflect on their life and just say, okay, that was it. That was it. Here in this room where we did for better or worse. There's something about that will always get to me. So maybe 6 is a little high, but I got to say, and I didn't say this at the beginning, the same way when we talked about Forrest Gump, I said, I really was looking for things to critique. I really wanted to approach this with a more critical eye. And I wound up just still loving it and thinking that it's great. I wanted to love here. So
did I.
I really wanted to disagree with the critics. I really wanted to say, I think they're wrong. And I think this movie's really strong. I think this movie's maybe a masterpiece. I was looking for everything I could to like about this movie. And I think that's why the ending at least sort of worked for me. Cause I was like, I need something I can latch into.
Yeah.
Because
I can see that.
I don't think it was a very good movie, but I wanted to like it.
I know. I want to like movies. I want to like them. And that's generally why I do like a lot of movies. But this one just, it was just, I had the same reaction. Like, oh, okay, well, I guess they're right. Like, it really wasn't that great. So,
yeah. Rewatchability. What's your score?
2. I don't really care if I see it again.
Yeah.
And also just the fact that like, okay, there's not much for me to go back to that I like, oh my gosh, that one scene. Do you remember that scene? Like that was so good. There's just not much to go back to. I'm sure that you could probably find, you know, some deeper meaning in it, but it just wasn't engaging enough for me to care as much about wanting to rewatch it.
I could see myself maybe watching this movie one more time in my life, maybe just for the basic fact that there's not really anything else that's like it, from the standpoint of how it was constructed, just to see, and maybe just to see if I missed anything. Maybe on a second watch, I go, oh, you know what? I never noticed that, or I doubt that I'll have a much different experience with it. But I put my score at 3 for rewatchability. I give it a 3 out of 10. Nice. On the off chance that maybe I watch it one more time, but I there's also a high likelihood that I never watch this movie ever again. Cultural relevance. What do you got it at?
I put it at a 2 because it's not doing anything. It has not made that much money at the box office. A lot of people aren't seeing it. Not a lot of people are talking about it. So, you know, it's not doing much. And they're leaning so heavily on the Forrest Gump aspect of it that it's not really its own movie in some ways. So
I'm going to kind of cheat here. I put a question mark. I'm an abstention vote because I do believe that there's the possibility that this this modality could be interesting to filmmakers going forward, and they could go, okay, here didn't work, but I think I've got a concept that could work for a stationary camera that doesn't cut, that, you know, that look.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we could see something. I wonder if we could even see something revolutionary, like a horror movie or something, where it's like the camera's like stationary, and it's like, you know, someone who somehow finds a way to make it work. And maybe it's a concept that can't sustain anything longer than 15 or 20 minutes. Maybe it like can't be a 90-minute film. Maybe it's, but I think that there could be something influential about someone doing it first and breaking the ground and being the first one when it comes to but I don't think that the actual culture is going to like be moved or changed by here. So probably my score is pretty low. It's probably where yours is, like a 2, but I also don't know. I don't know that this won't have some kind of effect on filmmakers who then will make future films that will be better than here using the same kind of conceit, and that will have, you know, so I don't know. Subjective score for here. Yeah,
mine, I put it at a 3, and I could maybe get it higher, but it's not horrible. Like it's, well, you know, it was bad. That's just how I feel. I didn't love it. It did have a very interesting concept that was, I felt like, very wasted by the gimmick of not moving the camera. If you just move the camera, I would have been much more invested in these characters and their emotions and everything. So disappointing.
Or write them a better script and give the actors more support. And you can do the same. You know, one of those two things. 3 for me as well. As much as I wanted to give it every point I possibly could, the only thing I can really say about this movie is that it attempted something. It took a big swing. It tried something, and I can give it all the kudos in the world for that. The execution kind of wasn't there on every front that it needed to be there on, and it was really, you know, just weird to watch a movie with like actors I really like and go, nobody's really showing up to do solid work in this thing. And also, but I'm like also listening to the words going, yeah, it's because the script kind of is laughably bad. And then the editing and the construction of the thing narratively just it wasn't helpful or useful to the audience, in my opinion. It didn't help us latch into anything. And so, yeah, I just I really wanted to like here, and I didn't very much, and put it at a 3 as well.
Yep, so, that's it.
That's
how it is.
That's how it goes down sometimes. Robert Zemeckis has made a lot of movies. He's made some really good ones. He's made some really mediocre ones, and he's made here.
Yeah. And going with what you're saying, I do appreciate that he does take extremely big swings. He is very daring, but most of the time he strikes out. But every once in a while he gets a complete grand slam, you know. And he did a lot more in his earlier career, but now it seems to be fewer and farther between, whatever it is.
Did you see here, everybody? If you did, let us know what you think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. And keep listening to the Oner podcast. We got more. We got more and more. There's just it's awards season. It's going to be good movies coming out here. We're
better be good movies.
Gladiator 2. We're going to see what's up with the ships in the Coliseum and all kinds of stuff. You know. So,
yeah. Wicked is coming out too.
Wicked Part 1. We'll see how it goes. So everybody stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next one. And take care out there. Okay.
See you later.
Bye.